Well, hello and welcome to our June garden tour. I can't actually believe it is going to be the 6th tour in a row. So you've really been able to follow along month by month how the garden is looking like. And I suppose, first of all, straight away, how different is this from January when I was totally frozen, my nose is going cold. And just to give you a heads up, if you see my nose turning red during all this filming is because it's like 4 degrees outside, but with the wind chill it's about 0, so it's actually really cold as well. And here I am in a summer dress sitting under a sunshade because it's a fabulous weather today. It's sort of low 20s. It feels proper summery. It is glorious, and that's the one thing about Ireland, because it's always so damp and wet. Even during the hottest, warmest day, really sunny days, summery days, it is just so lush and green. It still is just as fresh and vibrant as ever. But today's garden tour, without delaying this too much, and we'll go through and have a look at it, it's going to be a little bit different, because what I was thinking, just to change it up a bit, obviously, first of all, I'm not surrounded by hedges and I'm not starting from the orchard area, but I'm actually here just right at the steps of the edible garden, the kitchen garden side of it. And not only we're starting from the opposite end of the garden, but also I will overlay how the garden, or how bare or empty it looked in January. And you could really see then the contrast of the 6 months. I hope it's going to work out well. So let's get into that. And one of the reasons why I've started the garden from here is because this is now where the sort of vegetable growing area is actually starting from. So this is the newest addition. If you would have seen my last last video, then you would have seen me talking about this area. But this is like an extension at the moment to the kitchen garden, and it has 3 new raised beds in it, and it's accommodating all the pumpkins and winter squashes. So they did not fit into the kitchen garden this year, and the extension was needed for it. But also I do want to develop this area a little bit further. But I'm not talking about that, because there's actual beds that are full of something rather than looking at black plastic again. And right next to me are the gooseberry bushes, and this year we seem to have barely any fruit. Literally, I could probably count them up on my fingers. And some of it is probably to do with the late frost we got. I think the flowers got damaged, but also any of the fruit that did form, the hens were picking them off while they were still bright green. And ever since then I've had to sort of keep it covered, but I can still see that we've lost them because the hens have even gone under that netting that I've been using over it. They've been just jumping into the planter and helping themselves to unripe fruit, which they actually don't eat. They just pull it off, thinking they're tasting it, but they're not eating it. The fruit tree guilds at either side of this entrance to the kitchen garden from the field, these are looking fantastic. They never let me down. And this apple tree here, it's the variety called Discovery, is absolutely laden with fruit. They'll be thinned out a little bit more, but I do also see quite a few that where the young apples have split, and that's usually just to do with an influx of a lot of water. So basically we did have a few nearly flood warnings in May and early June that there was just too much water for the tree, and the tree just went through a massive growth spurt. But the lupins are flowering beautifully, and the chamomile is still in full flower. So this is an annual chamomile that I have. It sets seed. I usually then just move a bit of it around, and I think for next year I do have to rein it back again because there's just a little bit too much of it. The lavender hitcot, that's right in front of me, is flowering beautifully as well. And then the yarrow is starting to form the flower buds, but obviously it isn't open yet. And the rhubarb as well, with its big luscious leaves, absolutely beautiful. It's just a stunning plant to look at. And then the other side, the planter where I have the apple tree, James Grieve, had a bumper crop of apples last year, so it probably exhausted itself a bit, as this year there's way less fruit on it. And it's so common to have it with fruit trees. If they end up giving you a massive bumper crop one year, it probably pulls back then the following year. So even though we're in the kitchen garden, this plant right here is by far my favourite. And I know you've heard me gushing about this Nepenthes so many times. And I still love it. At the moment, sort of end of June, it is to the maximum flourability of this plant, because this is still the very first set of flower stems, and the flowers have opened out all the way to the very, very top of it, and it's absolutely just buzzing with bumblebees. Just buzzing. They are constant here from morning till evening. The bumblebees fly from flower to flower. And the size of the plant itself, it has got a beautiful impact to the overall area. And once this big first flush of flowers is gone, it will start putting out smaller side shoots, especially once I've sort of trimmed it back by a third or so. But yeah, at the moment, the highest, the biggest, the most voluptuous look. And right in front of me then is a beetroot bed, and the more I'm seeing, there's actually so many volunteer plants popping up in here. I can see wild rocket or arugula, there are strawberry spinach popping up, loads of calendula, dill, and a few weeds or borage as well thrown in, and then obviously the big chamomile again at the end of the bed. And the chamomile is just another plant that's absolutely adored by all the pollinators. And on the bean and pea frame, the first sowings of peas are doing way stronger. They have started to flower, but there's no pods on them yet. There's a lot of borage that I planted in the middle of it as well. And then obviously the runner beans and the climbing French beans, they're still trying to climb up the poles. I don't see any flowers on them yet, but they're coming. They'll all be coming shortly. And for the hoop bed, my latest update was that I ended up discovering cabbage root fly infestation in there. So unfortunately, all my purple cauliflowers are gone. And all the broccoli is gone, so there's only just some spinach still growing in it, then those couple of really big kales, Nero di Toscanas, which were actually planted last year, and I think that's the only reason they've been able to withstand the cabbage root fly maggot attack. And then there's a few turnips as well still growing, but the rest of it unfortunately is empty because that was something I cleared out last week, so I haven't been able to replace the plantings there yet. What's lacking in the brassica bed is definitely covered by the corn bed now, or where I have some of the summer squashes, the zucchinis in it, and then corn planted. I have this little metal planter in here in the really corner of the garden, and it's so cute at the moment. You wouldn't know that the only thing that's actually planted physically in here is this sweet pea, or a couple of sweet peas, and there's a flower starting to form on them, but the rest is all still in the pots. So these are the yarrow little baby seedlings I was taking out of one of the fruit tree guilds at the very end of last year, and I had potted them up and they stayed in their pots, and they're still in their pots, and the roots of the plants have gone right through the pots into the soil below. And there's a few chive seedlings here as well, and they're all flowering. I have a dahlia here in the pot, also flower heads forming, but together it looks like it's all planted, and it's really, really cute to look at. But at the same time, I don't have to worry about the pots because the roots are still getting plenty of moisture from the soil below. And then come autumn or next spring, I can actually really plant them out properly. And then right next to this planter is the blueberry bed. Well, one of the blueberry beds, the bigger blueberry bed. And it looks like we could be getting some nice harvest out of it. Well, at least I can see there are definitely more than 4 or 5 little blueberries forming on the pink variety, which I've never had any even taste test of a harvest from. And then there's more of the high bush varieties between the two planters that seem to have quite a few berries on them as well. So this is really exciting for us, especially considering that the wine weevil has been devastating a lot of these planters, and I used to have a lot of raspberries planted here as well, but the wine weevil basically destroyed all of them, and that's why even up to this year I don't have any strawberries, because I need to figure out how I'm going to grow them without having the wine weevil grubs getting into those root systems. Now the central raised beds area plantings are sort of a story in half. So half of them are successful and half of them have failed. So again, in here I had, well, first of all I had carrots that just would not germinate, and it's the same nearly with the metal raised bed here as well. Well, they actually, I have an evidence they have germinated, but the slugs just keep eating them. So I think I need to do now the 3rd sowing on it, and I still haven't got a crop out of them. But then the salads have been really successful, and the garlic is going okay. I've collected scapes of the hardnecks already, and some of the elephant garlic leaves have a bit of rust on them, but nothing too major, because they are getting close to their harvesting season now anyway. And then the sweet and celeriac are doing amazing. And last year, having lost all the celeriac seedlings in May, and not getting any growth out of any of them, I'm just delighted to see how well they're doing this year. Then the Greek gigantea seedlings are growing away. Well, 2 of them are growing and the other 2 are just constantly getting battered by slugs. But I do see flowers on them, and I just hope they'll be pods soon as well, because this year it isn't all about getting a harvest to eat, it's more about even preserving seeds for next year. And obviously, surely you'll see the row of potatoes. There's a lot of potato buckets there, and they've been a little bit of work at the moment, because obviously buckets, they need a lot of watering, but otherwise they're growing away well, except then the very first earlies. There's a couple of the Duke of York still left to harvest there. They are starting to die down. I can see brown spot affected on leaves on some of them, and some of the early plantings of Charlotte potatoes as well. But otherwise, the main crop at the moment is still doing well. Now, we are starting to get blight warnings, so I am trying to separate the individual pots as much as I can, just to provide as much of an airflow between the plants as possible. But my biggest delight out of all of the planters in here in this area is actually out of the Kona planter, the planter where I have the Maiju and Okain. So it's a mix of Maiju, that's a climber, sweet pea on the sort of TP tripod thing, that's a climber, and I can see flower heads coming out of that as well. And then the ground is covered with oca and some lettuce, and it just looks so lush and healthy and strong growing. And I'm especially happy with this area, because otherwise, with this being a wind tunnel, there was just so few plants that were happy in those conditions. And then the sweet peas in the sort of top planters are also climbing up the jute twine knitting, and I'm sure there'll be flowers off those soon as well. But now let's head over into the greenhouse. We won't fully go in because it is roasting inside there for sure. We'll see what the temperatures are. But yeah, let's check that out first, and then let's make our way towards the rose garden. And boy, is it warm inside here. It's 30.9 degrees at the moment, and at the peak it was 47 degrees so far. But everything is growing strongly in here. The tomatoes, especially the climbing ones, obviously in the middle here. Plus I definitely still need to put more strings into some of the side bed climbing tomatoes. I can see they're starting to flop over a bit. There's flowers on all of them. Absolutely all of them, and I can even see tiny fruit forming. Now, none of them have been the very early varieties, so I haven't had any harvest off them yet, but there's definitely plenty of fruit on the peppers. These are all the sweet bell peppers. There's California Wonder, Yolo, and Corno di Toro. And then there's a couple of sweet chili pepper plants down there as well. But absolutely beautiful growth amongst all of them. And there are tiny miniature pods forming actually on the purple dwarf French bean that's sort of planted in amongst the tomatoes here in this metal raised bed. And then outside, the same size of a bed that's right behind the door there, is the celery Utah that I planted last week, and then there's loads of shallots, and those have all gone into flower now. And I have a couple of cucumbers in the pots here as well, and I can see they are desperate for a drink of water. So this is the in-between area. So just as we're leaving the kitchen garden and heading towards the rose garden, this is sort of, I suppose we use it a bit like a barbecue space as well for ourselves. And these herbaceous planters or tiered planters is something I've discussed before. But this apple tree wasn't here in January. This was something I planted, I think it was maybe February or very early March. And it is a lovely dessert apple, and there are a couple of fruit on it as well. One of my definite favourite as a plant that's growing here is this purple flowering broad bean, and not because we love eating broad beans as such. It's actually just to do with how pretty the flowers on that broad bean are, just visually looking at it. Then also how resilient this plant has been. It has been attacked by slugs really severely. It has resisted howling winds, and the stem has basically flattened on some of them onto the ground, but up it pokes itself again, and it's really solid and sturdy. And it has a few aphids on it, but no other pests at the moment. And obviously, as being a part of the legume family, it's really good for the ground, for the soil, even if we don't end up eating it ourselves. But I'm really liking the way this plant is so resilient and resistant, and how it definitely looks like. It's like a flower itself. And then obviously we have more yarrow and calendula and lettuces at this end of the bed, which would have been basically empty in January. Looking back at the herbaceous border, you could really appreciate how pretty the lupin still is. And then the other big flowering plant in the middle is the geranium, because that just crawls everywhere. But also astilbe flowers are due to be opening soon, and phloxes. So the phlox would always open before the astilbe, and they're just about to burst open. And that's a white phlox that I have growing in there. If you like flowers any bit at all, boy, you're in for a treat. Unfortunately, I can't pass on the fragrance that just keeps wafting at me from the rose garden side, but I can sure show you the blooms. But before I head out from here, there's one plan that I had in January that I actually never fulfilled, but it's still something that I'm considering, is making the planter that's behind me into a herb bed. So I haven't done anything else with it either, so it has every bit the potential still to becoming our herb bed, but unfortunately it hasn't happened yet. But let's go and have a look at those stunning roses. Now, June is definitely the prettiest month in the rose garden, not just because all the roses are blossoming at this time, but it's also because the peonies are blooming now. And what I have here in the middle are those big Shirley Temple. And those flower heads are huge. Obviously there's so many in them, it's just physically the overall size of it as well. So I'm delighted that I ended up properly staking them now in spring, because they naturally already with their own weight hang downwards, and if we get any kind of rain showers on top of its own weight is always pushing them into the gravel. So it's lovely to be able to show you them as they are, nice and dry and still a little bit upright. But I have added more new plants here. There is a smallish Nepeta growing in here, and then a couple of salvians. And in the middle, the white gladioli leaves are showing. There's no flower heads on them yet. Then the climbing rose is also in full flower. Then surrounding the rose garden, I have this kind of a lineup of Queen of Sweden roses, which are also beautiful pink. They're actually very similar pink to the Shirley Temple peonies, but they have a beautiful upright habit and really nice healthy plant as well. And then what's climbing on the pergola is the Shropshire lad. Now, a lot of them do need deadheading as well, but at the moment, no, the flowers look stunning, and obviously all of them are scented. I do like the roses to be scented. Then the plants that give a little bit of a zing amongst all these pink soft pastel tones are the new Gabriel oak roses, and then the Darcy bustle roses as well. So they have much more vibrant purple tones running through them. There are also some native foxgloves dotted here and there, but I'm trying to weed them out gradually. Oh, and then the lilies. Obviously, the lily season is going to start soon, but I have these real deep, dark coloured lilies growing, and they are stunners. I absolutely love them. Now, before we head over to the cottage garden, I do want to say that as an overview, probably all looks rosy, but this year is definitely the worst year ever. I've seen the damage on the rose leaves by the rose slug. So this is that little pesky pest that just keeps eating away on the leaves. And I grow organically. I don't spray them with anything. I don't really believe anymore spraying anything on the leaves because it will affect the ecosystem. So my only solution for it is going to be just removing the leaves that are affected, especially if I physically even see the slugs on them or those little caterpillars on them. But at the very early stages, they're just so tiny, you just won't notice them. And then if I feed the roses, hopefully that will give enough of a new leaf growth, and it will help to sort of take away the unpleasant look that when you're close up to the roses here, you can see. And that is maybe the reason as well why I'm trying to just add more other plants around the roses now, so that I don't always have to face those difficulties, because roses are prima donnas, especially the older varieties. The newer varieties are getting bred stronger and healthier. So, but that's it. Let's get over to the cottage garden. But I need to get through here first, and I'd say you could definitely tell the hedges have gone mad. There's some difference between what they look like now and what they looked like in January. Obviously, you could hardly see them. They were that bare bones against brown background. Now in here in the cottage garden, I really do hope you can see the difference that new fresh planting has made, especially to the area itself already, because obviously in January it was just covered with black plastic. I changed my mind about how the planting is going to look like. So, and obviously January everything just looks so brown and mushy and ugly in a way, unless it's carpeted with a clean snow. Even though at the moment there's a lot of soil showing, because all those plants are just so new, they're so young, they haven't had time to physically fill out their growing spaces yet. And to the central circular area where I was originally planning to have grass on, I've just added some wood bark mulch onto, because the weeds were actually starting to grow there more than anything else, and this ground level itself was still very unbalanced, and it has holes in it where I had dug the roses out, so I thought it would be nicest and cleanest for the time being just to have it covered with the mulch, which will be then moved onto the beds anyway, and this way at least I don't have to worry about cutting the grass or getting the lawn started there, unless I even end up changing my mind. You never know. But otherwise, I hope that the planting scheme at least starts to give you the feel of that kind of a flowy and floral cottage garden theme. So the biggest plants that are going to be growing here and giving it more of a structure, I suppose, and some of them obviously are still small. One is the Sambucus, black lace. Then we have a hydrangea pink Annabelle. Then obviously the existing buddleia or butterfly bush, which is the white coloured one, and it already has its flower heads. I bought another purple flowering buddleia as well, and that had one flower head on it. And the persicaria is another really big one. But then the middle story as such are the astilbes, the roses themselves, or Joe Pye weed, that's going to grow big. And then all these flowers. So there is a lot of salvias, a lot of Nepenthes. There is mullein here, a beautiful purple lupin. There's sedums. I have dotted a couple of the grasses in between them as well. These beautiful stackies are going to be opening their flowers shortly. Veronicastrums are starting to put out their flower heads. A lot of yarrow I've added here as well, and then obviously all the verbenas. So between all of the flowers here, I hope the butterflies and bees, all types of bees, will be really happy here, that there's plenty of food for them, there's plenty of shelter, and overall for us obviously we'll have this kind of a beautiful floral abundance as well. So this was our June garden tour. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope you really saw a difference there as well between what it looked like in January, that it was quite drastic, and yeah, let's roll on July tour. See you next time.